Hello, everyone. I am Dave Becker, President and CEO of Angel Foundation. I really want to thank you for being here today. Angel Foundation is a local nonprofit here in the Twin Cities that is dedicated to helping families impacted by cancer through financial assistance, emotional support, and education. I am thrilled to have so many of you tune in today. Welcome to the Understanding Our Experiences Forum. This is the second of a three-part series. We are the convener of this important discussion around cancer and health equity. We will continue to provide a platform for our community to listen and learn about the significant challenges that people face around health equity. Angel Foundation is committed to being a part of the change we want to see in the community, and we will strive to continue to be a thought leader around this topic. I'm very excited about the discussion today. A huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their experiences. Today's forum was presented by AZI. Thank you for your sponsorship. I would now like to introduce our moderator and Angel Foundation's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee Chair, Jackie Thomas Hall. Welcome, Jackie.
Thank you, Dave. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Angel Foundation's Understanding Our Patients' Experiences Forum. I am on the board of Angel Foundation, as Dave said, and I'm also the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Allina Health. We are thrilled to have you with us today for our second webinar of our Understanding Our Experiences series. We had such a wonderful response from our first webinar that we thought it was important to continue the discussion and, more importantly, hear from those who are individually impacted by this particular disease. Once again, our goal is to be a facilitator of these important discussions to lend a platform to many to listen, to learn about the challenges that individuals face about health equity, and to gain an understanding of how different factors significantly contribute to healthcare disparities and identify strategies to minimize or eliminate their effects on health. This forum is the beginning of the work we are setting out to do. We need many voices, many experiences at our table to help those facing health equity challenges, and we are committed to being the catalyst to help move these issues forward. Now, we are not the experts on these experiences, and that is why we have this robust panel of individuals to help lead this discussion. Thank you all for joining us today. Together, we can all step up and move this important conversation forward. I would like to now welcome Dr. Avina Singh. Dr. Singh will be our host today and has vast experiences when it comes to oncology care. Welcome, Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Avina Singh. I'm a medical oncologist with Minnesota Oncology. Minnesota Oncology as an organization has been very actively involved in the Angel Foundation. We continue to support it and look forward to an ongoing wonderful relationship with all the wonderful work the Angel Foundation is doing. As Jackie mentioned, this is the second in the series of very important conversations that we want to have around cancer care and equity. And I'm very excited to have a wonderful panel with us. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. I would love for our three wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start off with Victoria. A brief introduction, please.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So my name is Victoria Seamon, and I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, specifically invasive ductal carcinoma, and mine was ER and PR positive, and this happened August of 2020. And so for me and my journey, I underwent mastectomy, chemotherapy, and radiation. And currently, as of May of this year, I was declared in remission, so very happy about that. And otherwise, I'm doing hormone therapy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Victoria. And we'll circle back with more questions. Ruben, we'd love to hear from you, a brief introduction.
Welcome. Sure. Thank you. Ruben Rosario. I was diagnosed with stage 3 multiple myeloma on, of all days, April Fool's Day in 2011. And I underwent about a year and a half of chemo, very aggressive chemo, then placed on a Revlimid pill maintenance program in October of 2012. And I'm still barely taking that pill. What my oncologist has described to me is people that have multiple myeloma are really not in remission or cancer-free because there's no cure yet for multiple myeloma. But I'm considered to have a complete response so far to the treatment. So that's where I am right now.
Wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Cindy, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Nelson Kaigama, and I had a cancer diagnosis I had a diagnosis starting in 2016, but I was living and feeling the cancer grow in my body for over 10 years. It was a rare type of soft tissue sarcoma called DFSP, and it's hard for me to pronounce it. It's maybe you can help me, Dr. Singh. Typhrobrosarcoma protuberant.
You did great.
Okay. Basically, it was a soft tissue cancer that is very rare. I was the first case that this health system had ever treated in the state of Minnesota. And I had in my body, like I said, I felt it growing for years, and it kept dismissing me and dismissing my concerns. And it wasn't until I turned 40 and I had two children, that I was able to actually get a mammogram. And then that's when they discovered it and they started listening.
Thank you, everyone, for that introduction. Due to time constraints, unfortunately, we cannot take live Q&As right now. We are monitoring the chat box, and a lot of those will be posted with our recording later too. So thank you for your patience on that, but we really want to hear live from our panelists. I know a lot of you on the call will connect with all of them, and a lot of these stories would resonate. Victoria, we'll get started with you again. Tell us a little bit about you, pre-diagnosis, diagnosis, after, where things are now. I know we heard a little bit, but we'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience and where things are now.
Sure. Thank you for your question. So for me, I'm a big foodie. I love to go out to eat, try new foods, cook, listen to music, experience other cultures, and travel. And so life had been pretty good for me. In fact, I was actually preparing for a road trip to tour state parks when I ended up finding a lump. And I have been told on various occasions that cysts are pretty common for Black individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had cysts before, so I figured I'd wake up the following morning and it would go away. And well, unfortunately it didn't. And at the time, we still took that road trip and just made the best out of it. And, after I returned, I sought out a doctor and just kind of went through the motions as far as, getting screening and things like that. And I know initially I was told that, tumors usually aren't, tender or painful, so it's probably not cancer. And so, unfortunately, in fact, I learned that I had grade 3 breast cancer. And, for me, I just thought, how is that even possible? And so I know cancer has had a huge impact on my life. It's like living with uncertainties. I look back at old photos and I wonder, did I have cancer then? Or what about this photo? And, just so many thoughts and questions just kind of have run through my mind. And I mean, I think, even till this day, I still, kind of remain in shock and disbelief at times. You question, why me? Why at the age of 34? Just so many questions. And me, I'm a mental health practitioner and I work with kids in a day treatment program. And so I'm used to being the one that people come to when they're having problems and taking care of others and also serving in my church and essentially just living selflessly. And so, I'll never forget when I had to tell the kids that I work with that I have breast cancer. And it was definitely one of the most difficult conversations that I had to have. And I remember one kid specifically, saying that he didn't want to work with me anymore because I was just going to die from cancer. And, it was one of the hardest things to hear. And even in my head, I thought, I don't know, it's possible. And, not too long before that, I actually had a cousin that passed away from breast cancer who was 34 when she passed. And so, just the unknown, I think, had been worrisome, and just so many thoughts ran through my mind about, hey, should I pay this bill or do cancer treatment? And I think other significant impacts for me is, just with the extent of treatment, and kind of developing things like neuropathy, just the things that I used to just know and love, I wasn't able to, really physically do. And so, but I know now, I mean, I definitely don't take life for granted. And I mean, each day I just try to live, to the fullest whenever possible.
Wow. Thank you. I have goosebumps. That was so great. Ruben, I know I think you mentioned 2011 was when you were diagnosed, and it's been a long journey, and we're so grateful that and want to keep you on that path with your maintenance treatment. Did you, through the whole health insurance and health system navigation, since it's been such a long trajectory, can you share with us any of the challenges you may have experienced?
Well, there's physical, mental, and financial. All three came at the same time. The physical was, dealing with a year and a half of aggressive chemo, during which there were 3 rounds, I believe. Well, there were a half dozen bone marrow biopsies, which were painful, even with the numbing medication. And there was 3 rounds of 24/7 chemo being pumped into my body at a hospital. And then there were 2 stem cell transplants, 6 months apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the physical challenges. Oh, a rupture, appendectomy in the midst of chemo. And then there's been 3 or 4 pneumonia episodes, septic shock throughout the years, but I'm still here and above ground. So I give a lot of blessing to God and my caretaker, principally my wife. But then the mental was not so much for me. I never said, why me, to myself, but the worry and the mental stress was more about worrying about my family, my wife, and my youngest child, who's now 21, a son. And kids have a way of hiding things from you, of how they feel. And, it really stressed him out. He never publicly or confided in me his thinking, but he always thought, and he was 11 at the time, that I would die at any moment, any day. And that gradually affected him in terms of him gaining substantial weight and then his grades plummeting. But at home, he was fine. He was joking around and all that. So the impact of cancer was not so much on me. I'm just the patient. It was on my caretaker and on my kids. The financial one was, while I had employee-sponsored health insurance, I was not prepared for the cost of out-of-pocket expenses. Throughout the years, even when I was working, even when I have employee-sponsored health insurance, we averaged, which included some health issues for my wife, about $15,000 to $18,000 a year coming out of my pockets. And that's not including the $700 or $800 a month that I had to pay for my employee subsidized insurance. And then came the culture shock, financial culture shock. When I retired, I always thought Medicare would solve all problems. They only created more. And it was more the weight of my shoulders now to navigate the health insurance system in terms of dealing with how to pay for co-pays and things like that. So.
Thank you for walking us through that very comprehensively. Cindy, tell us a little bit about your journey and what kind of challenges you have had. And I know we heard a little bit from our other panelists, but would love to hear from you too, your perspective.
Yeah, so for me, I just wanted to say the reason, just to start with, the reason that I work in healthcare and switched my career because of the number of times I've been left for dead by providers. We have enough data historically to understand the impact that healthcare has been on African-American women in this country and across the globe. So it became not only personal for me, but also from a professional lens so that I could have a seat at the table with making change. Because I literally, like I said, I felt it when it was a pellet in my breast. And I kept getting, I kept getting breast exams. I kept saying, hey, there's something wrong here. And similar to Victoria, well, African-American women have dense breasts, or cysts are not something that is a big deal, so don't worry about that. And I kept saying, this is growing. This isn't just dense breast. This isn't just a cyst. But because of the health insurance and the way policies are set up, and because I was under 40, right? I didn't meet the standard according to insurance and what they would pay for of getting a breast examination under 40 years old. I had to live with this in my body and continually to speak up, and no one was listening. So by the time it was a size of a large cherry, I know it was at least 10 years. And the same, one of the providers who almost left me for dead said I couldn't have children. So I'm very grateful that I was able to give birth to 2 children. And I felt it with the first child, and they said that it was a clogged milk duct, and just to keep pressing it out and eventually would come out, put hot water pads on it. That never happened. So, having children and was told I couldn't have children, that was a whole level of overwhelming experience right there. So I kind of forgot about it. I was able to nurse my son and had a plethora of milk overloading left. So the second child, it was different, and it had grown bigger. And by the time it was the second child, I was what? So I had 39. Yeah, so I was almost 40 when I had the second child, and I had just switched providers. And I also want to say that, sometimes it is data to say that the providers who look like you some are most comfortable for patients, but that's not always the case, because a lot of my providers, after I had the experience with the one who almost left me for dead, I did switch and to start to get providers who were of African descent or of non-dominant culture, so that I can have more of a cultural connection. So I had a provider who was of African descent, and she dismissed me, I felt like, even more, unfortunately, because of her knowledge and experience and not listening to me as the patient. So she told me that, I have been practicing medicine for a very long time, and I'm not going to argue with you about your experience, and you're the patient and you need to listen to me. And I said, okay, well, you have maybe been practicing, but this is my body and I've had it my whole life. And I've been advocating and saying there's something wrong. This is getting bigger. It's not just a clogged milk duct. I felt it grow from the first child. Now it's bigger with the second child. So I had to stop nursing my daughter because I had turned 40 finally. And then they did do a mammogram. And at the mammogram, the radiologist came in, and the tech had to go and get somebody because they had never seen anything like that before on the breast exam. And they reassured me that it was not a big deal, but they would do a biopsy, and it took 3 weeks for the biopsy to come back. Thankfully, there was one provider one radiologist at a different health system in the state of Minnesota who was familiar with the type of sarcomas that I had, and he diagnosed me, and they had recommended that I have surgery to remove the sarcoma from my breast. The thing that was most frustrating for me, and if some of you were on this panel before, you heard that I was called a case study when I would go back into the clinics to get the exams and before my prep for the surgery. And that was very offensive to me, because I'm a human being that's dealing with an experience I've been advocating for almost 10 years. And then to say, oh yeah, you're the case study we've been working on. No, I'm not a case study. I'm a human being, and you need to address me by my name. I was also accused of being a difficult patient. And I said that this is my body and I am going to advocate for myself. So if you're advocating for yourself, it doesn't mean that you're a difficult patient, you're advocating for yourself. So I think those were things that were most impactful and memorable. I am fortunate to say that I did have surgery and they followed me for a year and I didn't have to have any other treatments after that. But I just now that same anxiety where if there's something going on in my body, is it cancer? Because it was so rare and had never been treated. So I'm always concerned because the oncologist told me that because of the type of cancer, if you do a PET scan or a type of a scan, it doesn't always show up in your body. So that's something else that I'm always conscious of, and the impact it has on my children, because like I said, it was extremely rare and it can be transferred. Can it transfer to one of my children? So that alone, just with my cancer experience and other experiences that I had with navigating my health, has really put me to the direction of always striving to get equitable policies and create systems and policies change that have really traditionally impacted people who've been statistically marginalized and oppressed, so that we can have futures that our grandchildren and their grandchildren hopefully won't have to have these same experiences.
Thank you so much, Cindy. You highlighted a lot of important topics. Victoria, moving back to you, could you tell us a little bit about your support system through this journey? Did you feel supported? Did you not? What kind of messaging can you tell our audience about that?
Yeah, so I know when I, went to the various appointments that I had as things were just kind of getting underway, I thought to myself that I should have, hundreds of questions, but I don't, and I kept questioning, you know, why is that, and how does a person know? And I think for myself with, navigating something just so like new and unfamiliar to me, I didn't know the questions to ask, and I think that left me feeling pretty worried along the journey. And I mean, fortunate enough for me, I actually have an aunt that is a breast cancer survivor. She was actually diagnosed when she was 38, and so she had actually been my advocate along the journey. And so I was able to just kind of zoom her in, or use various video chats to just have her present in an appointment. And so, she was able to just kind of be my voice in some of the instances and just ask questions that I wasn't thinking about, or just knowing how to go about things. And so I'm grateful, and I feel like that's been pretty supportive along my journey. And then otherwise, I mean, in general, I do have, a close network of friends and family, and then also a church community that has supported me along this as well.
Very glad to hear that. Ruben, what about you? I know you mentioned about your wife, your caregiver as a support system. Do you, as you know, of course, you know about the Angel Foundation and the work they do. Keeping that support system in mind, do you have anything that you would advise the Angel Foundation on what they, and community organizations, just to help cancer patients more? What would you be your advice from them from your personal perspective?
Well, my experience with the Angel Foundation was mostly indirect, because the great thing about the Angel Foundation, through my experience, was not for me, it was for my son. And actually, the emotional support that he received from not only the Angel Foundation volunteers, but his peers, other children of parents who were dealing with cancer, was invaluable during my time. It just took mental load off my stress while I was dealing with chemo and hospitalizations and working at the same time. But what I would say is, from a cultural aspect, I never really gravitated to support groups. Maybe it's a macho thing, maybe it's a Latino thing, but if I didn't see, I couldn't connect with people there, and I've always been kind of a lone wolf. So I tended to mostly deal with my mental thing myself. But I connected with other people in the Latino community who were going through cancer, other men, through conversations, not support groups, not hand holdings. I'm not against that, but there's something cultural that prevents me or it makes me hesitate. And maybe had I seen another Latino male, perhaps in the angel support group, some organization, maybe I might have lowered that shield and taken part of it. But it wasn't just me. So I guess my advice to organizations, particularly when they're reaching out to BIPOC communities, particularly a Latino community, beyond the language barriers, beyond the culture barriers, is it needs more than just a bunch of brochures resting on the table. You need to actually go out, whether it's a volunteer ambassador from that same community, to physically, face-to-face, interact and let them know about Angel Foundation, let them know about organization to, again, lower that shield that I myself admit I had. And I think that's the advice, just go out. I wrote a column about a pastor from Boston who's helping at-risk kids, from drug dealing and gangbanging. And the thing that always stuck with me with what he said was that, I can't reach these kids preaching every Sunday from a pulpit. I am competing against that drug dealer and that gangbanger recruiter on the street corner. So I have to go and evangelize on that same street corner. And so the same parallel exists. You have to go where the people are.
That was great. Thank you for highlighting those cultural differences. I think that's really the point of this conversation, right? To normalize all that and bring that out all in the open. So a lot of times people just don't know that there are these differences. So thank you for that great advice and perspective. Cindy, coming back to you, I know you mentioned briefly in the introduction and then the first question about, advocacy and changing policy. Can you talk a little bit more as to how you would see that happen, or how you would like to see that happen, rather?
Well, being that I work in health equity, I'm always focused on the lens of health equity. And just to simplify that, health equity just means power, like power to be able to make and advocate and make your decision that works best for you and your family. And so that we're including all people in the conversations. And a lot of times when historically, when policies were created, my culture, my community was not a part of that conversation, right? So the people represented here were not a part of those conversations. And it's from a lens that you never know when it's your turn, and you never know the impact that it's going to have until it impacts your family. So if we think about it, not from just a business case, because we know that we need to make money, we know that we need to be in business and be sustainable, but if we don't have people and to spend and buy health insurance and to be engaged in those experiences, then it doesn't matter, the business won't exist. So if we rethink and realign our work so that we're putting the end user first and we engage the end user, if that means to actually pay people to participate in market research and not just say, hey, fill out this survey for us and continue to do this work at no cost. For example, if you think about policies, just the things that we talked about, right? So how much data does it take to say to reduce the rate of, reduce the baseline measure for certain chronic diseases based on ethnicity? So if we know that there's a higher rate of breast cancer or prostate cancer among African-American people, I do know that prostate was just lowered. But if you think about it, if you change the policy from an insurance lens that, yes, we have a baseline measure, but those measures weren't created on the people who are most impacted. If you think about that, if you understand the policy and the political and the policies that are in place, we weren't a part of those conversations and we weren't a part of those baseline measures when they were creating those. So because you already know, you have the data to show that we have a higher rate of chronic disease because of those systemic and long-term oppressions that we've faced as a culture, that you have to then now make it a business case so that you change and continue to make money off of the chronic condition, but at least you're catching the disease earlier and you're able to treat it so that the people can live longer. That's another example. The other thing I think about is in regards to the health insurance. I was young, right? I had 2 children. I wasn't really focused on at that time the way I am now. I was more focused on frustrated that I can't get a mammogram and I'm asking for this because the doctor keeps telling me you don't have risk factors, you're too young. So I never thought to contact the insurance company myself because I was earlier in the process. Now, 10 years fast forward, 15 years fast forward, of course, I'm working directly and have a lot of voices and feedback to say in creating systems and policy changes within organizations and people who I work with. So that being said, you have to engage your customer. And yes, it's a patient, but they're also the customer. So if you're a health insurance company or you're an organization and from the lens of healthcare, pay the person and do market research to help for the policy change. Look at your data and don't look at your data from an implicit bias lens too. Look at it from a lens around health equity and making sure the people who are most impacted are the people who are leading that change. So nothing against people of European culture, but if the impact is on people like me, an African-American woman who has had this lived experience, then your focus should be having an African-American woman who had the lived experience of high rates of breast cancer that's leading that strategy or leading that project because they had that lived experience. Now, that's personal information, right? That's rare. But as you get to understand your staff and the people that you know, it can be a special project that you promote and say, we're looking for people in these communities who represent, so that because we're looking to change the policies that we have that are impacting men and women of these particular cultures. That happens, that's market research, and pay the people to do that so that you can create equitable policies.
Thank you, Cindy.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of food for thought and change. Yep. Victoria, coming back to you, I know we heard through the conversation about financial challenges, which really can impact a person's cancer journey. Was that something you encountered also? And can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So for myself, I was actually working on financial freedom before I received my diagnosis, and without a doubt, cancer was a huge setback. And I think in the healthcare industry, it appears that there isn't a lot of transparency regarding the cost of care. And when you think about the things that might benefit you, there's a cost to it. So like genetic testing or PET scans and things like that. And I remember researching the cost of care at one point and requesting an estimate. And I initially got an estimate for, it was just one chemotherapy infusion, and the estimate was 80,000. And so like it just makes your heart just sink, and it's just like, oh my goodness, like how do people survive when cancer hits you, and you have to choose, am I going through treatment, or do I pay this bill? And so I know finances were definitely something that I really worried about. And I know, I mean, there definitely have been some great programs out there. I mean, I do think about the Angel Foundation and the Financial Cancer Care Program, and that gave me the opportunity to meet with a financial planner and actually just help me just kind of stay grounded and just kind of look at things and, just kind of find a balance where hopefully things wouldn't be so overwhelming, and just how to stay afloat when this hits you, and, how do you support yourself and things like that. I think about a different challenge that, aligns with the whole finances. And for me, it had to do with health insurance and coverage. And so I had a moment where I received a letter from my clinic that said my coverage was terminated. And so I have no idea where that came from. And so then I call my insurance, and they're saying like, nope, you've had coverage all year. So then they're like, we'll call the clinic back. And so I literally just went back and forth, just like calling, and I wasn't getting answers. It's like every single time I spoke with amazing customer service representatives. Majority of them always said, like, I'll call you back, I'm looking into this, and I mean, pleasant conversations, and I literally, all I could do was just hold on to hope. But I got to a place where I was literally just like pleading with people like for help. And I feel like a person should not have to get to that place. And so I feel like when it comes to to health insurance and the financial piece, I don't feel like there's a lot of support with that, and just having to navigate that while undergoing treatment, it just doesn't, it's not helpful. And I think it just creates, a significant amount of undue stress that is just, completely unnecessary. And so, I mean, I just kind of hope, going forward or in the future that, things like health insurance and just, overall financial resources can really be a focus. And I do think about, communities of color, particularly that definitely need to be reached as far as offering supports and just making sure that, they have the means necessary to get the health care that they need, and then also support themselves and their families.
Great. I mean, you're just resounding the message of the Angel Foundation, so, and all of what they do. So it's so real. Ruben, I know we spoke about your support system. Can you talk a little bit more, switching gears a little bit, to just your healthcare team and support in that regard? Did you feel like you felt supported? Do you feel like you got enough information through this journey? Can you talk a little bit more to that? Oh, sorry, Ruben, you're on mute.
Yes, in a nutshell, yes, I had the medical support that I received was excellent. As a matter of fact, from the oncologist to the University of Minnesota bone marrow transplant team, to the nurses, to the assistants who walked into my hospital room and just cleaned and joked around. I mean, no, really, the nurses, I call them angels in sneakers because they're angels to me. I mean, that was my support system. I already talked about the support system in my home with my wife, who was my primary caretaker. But I do want to point something out, going a little bit off topic, and that is, once you transition, when I had employer-sponsored health insurance, my copay for the one pill that I take, which retails for an astronomical $22,000 a month for 28 pills, which is Revlimid, I was able to, because of my employer-sponsored insurance and a partnership between the manufacturer and the union that sponsored my health insurance, I only paid $25 copay for that one pill per month. Once I retired and went to Medicare, my copay went up to $1,500 a month, okay? And given the fact that my dependent income is mostly Social Security and a modest pension, that $1,300 a month translates to about 35% of my total income right now, okay? Which is crazy, right? You would think that once you get into Medicare, things get easier. Well, I have to every year apply for a foundation grant to help me pay for that copay, okay? And thankfully, for the past 2 years, I got a grant from the Health Well Foundation, and this year from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And even then, there'll be months, 2 or 3 months, where I have to dig into my own pockets and help pay for that. So someone who doesn't understand or navigate the system following Medicare, someone who's low income, someone who has a language barrier, my heart goes out to them, because it really 90% of my time dealing with my health insurance was me dealing with my health insurance. I may have some indirect assistance, but it was a lot of months of, applying for these grants, working through my oncologist assistants. And I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way.
You're right. I mean, this is increasing frustration with all the treatments that we have that are so phenomenal and life-saving, but the cost, it just makes it incredibly hard. And what you highlight is a really big challenge for patients and healthcare providers, because we know we want to give you that life-saving treatment. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Cindy, I know you're very involved with equity, inclusiveness, diversity. Any closing comments to that with regards to cancer care?
Yes, one of the things I think that's very important, this is a nonprofit organization that provides financial assistance to people who are struggling and have may have low income, and some of them is income based and some of it isn't. But the reality is that if you never know when it's going to be your turn, right? I remember when Steve Jobs had talked about his experience and how he had all the money in the world, but he still could not do anything to save him from dying from cancer. Most recently, Amy Klobuchar talks about her experience with breast cancer. So you never know when it's going to be your turn. So if you have an opportunity, if you are a philanthropic organization, if you are someone that can give to the Angel Foundation so that they can not only help somebody one time, that they can also continue and maybe partner with pharmaceutical companies so that you can have lower costs in drug costs. I have a person that I'm caregiving for, and same experience where I called the insurance company 5 or 6 times and they gave me 5 different answers, right? And it's that anxiety that you don't anticipate experiencing, but that's front in your mind is, do I pay and buy food, or do I pay for the drugs so the person can live longer on this earth? So if you have the opportunity, give to this organization, give to other organizations that are fundraising, that are trying to help people in community, because you never know when it's going to be your turn. So I think that's the one takeaway for an action item for people if they're on this call, to be able to give to organizations like the Angel Foundation. And don't limit how they spend the money. As long as it's legal, moral, and ethical, let them do what they need to do, that it's not restrictions on them, so that they can help people in ways they need to be helped. Because it may not align with your everyday lived experience, but it doesn't mean that somebody's not impacted in a way that's different, that needs assistance. But if it's just one time, that $200 is great. But if I'm trying to pay a $10,000 bill, or I got a $1,000 bill, I have to still feed my family. And I didn't anticipate on having this experience. I would love, to have a continual assistance that I can, if I need, to be able to get another $200 or another grant to help while I'm navigating, or not me personally at the moment, but while somebody's navigating cancer and they're managing their finances as well.
Thank you, Cindy. So we just have a few more minutes before we wrap it up, and I wanted to give Victoria and Ruben just a chance for any closing comments, any closing thoughts before we log off on anything you'd like to share with the audience.
Sure. So for me, I just wanted to just kind of like wrap up and just hone in on for me and just the challenges that I experienced when I was diagnosed. And so, I mean, a few things that come to mind, and I know Cindy has talked about some of this. The messages you hear is, getting a mammogram after the age of 40. And I know in my situation, if I had waited that long, then my fate would have been drastically different. And, along this journey, I've learned that those messages don't apply to everyone. And as I'm learning more about African American, Black breast cancer, and the fact that Black women are diagnosed at earlier ages and tend to be higher stages, and mine was a stage 3 right off the bat, and that was pretty terrifying for me. And I think if it weren't for me finding this lump, then I wouldn't have been eligible for a mammogram. And I feel like this is just something that needs to be talked about more. And I also think about I think I've experienced some moments where I didn't always feel like I was being heard, or just felt like a rush. And I think about my age of diagnosis as well. And I think even as an adult, just being hit with something like cancer just made me feel like a child again, and just like needing, a parent to just kind of walk me through it. And it's just a frightening thing. And also I think about the challenges with just the forms of treatment themselves. And I mean, I understand, the reasons behind the treatment. But again, just having to navigate that, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it was very scary and extremely lonely for me. And I think, not being able to have visitors while, a very strong drug is going through your body. Or I even think about my first time when I went through radiation, and it's like you're in this room and you're laying on this table and there's these stars that appear like in the ceiling and this huge machine that's hovering over you. And so to me, like I joke about it every day where I felt like I was being abducted by aliens, because that's how it seems. And like it's just so terrifying. And so I think, you don't really get a lot of support on how to really prepare for those things, and really just what to expect. And I still think, bottom line, just, for me being 34, and I do hear that there's other people that are diagnosed at even earlier ages, it's frightening. And I think, I just like encourage, people to just pay more attention to, specifically just racial disparities when it comes to, diagnoses, and, just understanding that, it affects people differently and at different ages. So thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that. Very important. Ruben, any closing comments?
Well, just from my own personal experience, I had great medical support. But you have to advocate, as Cindy mentioned, you have to advocate for yourself. And even against, resisting or whatever, it is your body, and you know what's going on with it. And that's the best thing. But it's helping people less fortunate than me, helping to navigate when they do contract a very serious illness. I think that's the main thrust that we should take from this conversation, is to reach out to those people, reach out in the best way, get out of your comfort zone, go out to where they are, because there's a lot of people out there hurting, but they just don't know how to navigate the system. They don't know how to reach out for help. And I think that's where foundations like the Angel Foundation organizations can really come in and fill that gap, become a bridge to help navigate that system. And the last thing I like to say is that, I have cancer, and, we're all gonna at some point die from something, and my thing is, I've had a great life, and, when my time comes, I'm gonna be satisfied that I try to live as best I can, even with this cancer journey, as some people call it. But always keep the chin up and find the support where you need it, where you can find it.
Wonderful. Well, I just wanted to thank Victoria, Cindy, and Ruben for all those great comments and insight, and spending your time and sharing a journey with us with such honesty, and all great points for us to take forward. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jackie for some closing comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And wow, once again, we have had some tremendous sharing and some tremendous learnings, and we really appreciate the authenticity of each of you showing up, sharing your journey, sharing your truth, because again, that is the only way that I think that we can learn and make those connections and begin to understand that everyone's experiences are their experiences. But as healthcare providers and as caretakers, we truly need to walk in empathy. So thank you, Avina. And again, to all the panelists, your stories, your focus really helped us to understand how we might navigate and really focus on this work differently. When conversations are shared, it allows us to hear many different voices and experiences that individuals are facing. We need to first listen and seek to understand before we can initiate a plan to help address health equity issues. We hope that this forum will generate a shared vision for the leaders in the cancer community, that we will begin to really understand how we can impact health inequities. Once again, our goal for this event is to start an important discussion that will lead a strategy for the cancer community, a plan that we all can take part in to help us understand those dreaded words, "you have cancer," and what we can do to support those individuals. It is important for us to attract a variety of experiences and voices to sit at this table with Angel Foundation to help build a strategy that offers both bold actions to make a difference. We are excited to share that we will have a third part of this series that will take place in November. We will be looking at a culturally responsive care discussion within the Native American community. We will make sure you are all invited. We hope you will join us as we continue these very important conversations. After this series, we will begin to focus on a strategy around our approach to culturally responsive care. We will begin to set goals and take action on our plan to connect with those that need us most. Immediately following this session, you will receive an email with a survey link. We would love to hear from you about your experience today and provide us your feedback. Once again, thank you for sharing the space with us today. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to keeping and being in touch with each of you. Thank you.